Yo, what's up, Broncos country? This is Eddie with Rocky Mountain Blitz. Second video today. I just wanted to talk more in depth about the whole Zach Wilson trade to the Denver Broncos and what it means for this draft, for the future, and honestly, just all around. What does it mean? So here we go. So basically, today, what happened was after the new uniforms were released, after Levi Wallace was signed, the corner, the big news of the day was, Zach Wilson traded to the Denver Broncos from the New York Jets. Now, a lot of people, like, I've been watching a lot of videos, a lot of Bronco, podcasts, everything, and just national media. What this actually means for the Broncos going forward and in the draft and for this season, honestly. And there's a lot of ideas floating around out there. A lot of, this is what's most likely going to happen. This is what's going to happen. So this is a video in response to those and what I think this could possibly mean. I don't know 110%, but based on just all the rumors I've heard and what I think is going to happen, this is my idea of what I think is going to shake out this year. So, a lot of the videos and podcasts I've been watching over the last couple hours, ever since the news broke that Zach Wilson was traded to the Denver Broncos, which they didn't really give up much for him. They pretty much, swapped the seventh for a sixth for a seventh and got Zach Wilson. So they moved back about 50 spots in the NFL draft, from like, I think it was like pick 207 to like pick 250 something. So they didn't really give up. They didn't give up anything for it, honestly. And basically people are saying this is still like this doesn't mean anything for the Broncos in the draft. This just, is a backup plan is what most people are saying. But this doesn't change the fact of what the Broncos were going to do before this trade actually went through. This doesn't change what the Broncos are going to do. And my thing is that means the Broncos are going to hope that JJ McCarthy falls to 12 or, the Broncos trading back to like maybe pick 18, maybe pick 19, getting another, pick or two, and then still drafting a quarterback. Now, who that quarterback is has changed a lot. Like a lot of the people I've been seeing say, oh, the Broncos are going to trade back to like pick 18 right before the Rams because a lot of people think the Rams might take a quarterback this year because of Matthew Stafford getting older. So they can trade back to 18, still take a Knicks or take a Penix, but that's that's pretty much what they're gonna do. And then pick up an extra draft pick, like a second or a second round pick, which that'd be great. Whatever, cool. Before today, I was not on that assumption. I was like, don't trade back for the sake of trading back. If Bo Nix is there at 12, you take him. If you let Stidham start the season, it is what it is. If he plays the season, Nick just sits all year. If he comes in halfway the last couple of games, or if he starts the season, whichever, give him a year in the system to, develop and learn. Now, my whole perspective on this thing has changed. Now that I've got to actually sit and, kind of look at what other people were talking about and actually get to think about it, I do think the Broncos do trade back. Honestly. Like, I think JJ was probably Sean Payton's number one at this point, but whenever they realize, and maybe even Drake May. Drake May might have been the number one option. I think JJ or Drake May were one of those top options. Was Sean Payton's top option. Now that as he gets closer to the draft, Sean's like, we can't really give up future assets. We can't give up all this stuff. We can't give up Patrick Surtain. We gotta stay at pick 12 or trade back. So they go out and get Zach Wilson. Now, a lot of people are saying this is a stopgap quarterback. Other people are saying, oh, they're going to, go into the season with just Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson, and they're basically be tanking this year. Hopefully they'll tank this year, build a roster up, get a top 5 pick next year, go into the draft and get a quarterback like a Shador or something like that. I'm not on that train. I really don't think that's the case. What I think personally is going to happen, and I know this is a way out in left field, but I just I don't see the Broncos not taking a quarterback. Now, like I said, that who that quarterback is has changed. It could be a Michael Pratt in the third round or the second round. It could be a Spencer Rattler. It could be still a Bo Nix or Michael Penix. But this is what this tells me. What I think is going to happen is that The Broncos are going to trade back now. I was dead set against it. I didn't think they should do that before today because it's like, if one of those top guys there, Bo Nix or P Nix, not top guy, but one of those guys are there at pick 12, you can't risk losing them. So it's like now, it's like you got Zach Wilson, you got Jarrett Stidham. This is what I think is going to happen. What I think is going to happen is that I think the Broncos do trade back to like probably somewhere in like the low 20s, like with the Eagles, like pick 22. They pick up a second rounder and another third rounder, get a couple more picks. They trade back, get those couple other picks. And if I'm sorry, not Pratt, but if Penix or Nix is still there, preferably Nix, if he's still there at pick 22, Sean Payton takes him. And then basically what's going to happen this year, you get 2 extra picks. You can still build the roster this year. You'll have 2/3, a second, fifth, and a sixth and a seventh. I might be a little wrong there. I don't know how, what all picks the Broncos have right now. But they still draft Bo Nix at say 22, pick up a couple of extra draft picks to build the roster. And Bo Nix ain't going to start this year unless this is what I think is going to happen. Bo Nix is going to be on the bench. He's going to be sitting and learning for this year, or Michael Penix, whoever they decide, will stay on the bench this year, and there'll be a quarterback competition for the starting job between Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. Whoever wins that quarterback competition will be the starter for 2024, and the loser of that competition will be cut, whether it's Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham. Because, like I said, if you cut Jarrett Stidham, you save $5 million. You cut Zach Wilson, you really ain't gonna have a whole lot of dead cap. Like, I think the Broncos are paying I think it's like 2.5. They're paying like half of his contract. The Jets are paying for the other half. So you're not really gonna, you'll save $5 million with Jarrett Stidham. You're not really gonna lose anything if you cut Zach Wilson. So whoever wins that competition will be the star. The other guy will be cut. And you'll go through the season. And it works doubly if you think about it this way, too. Like, if Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham are the starter, you're probably going to have a top 10 draft pick next year because those guys ain't going to win you a whole lot of games. So at that point, it's like, okay, you go into the draft next year, you got top 10 draft pick. You already got your QB on the roster and Bo Nix of the future on the roster. Then you take that first overall pick next year, and you can trade back and get more picks next year and fill out your roster more. And like I said, the Broncos are going to have $100 million in cap space next year. They can very easily be like, okay, we can sign a couple of decent free agents, bring them in, and still have plenty of cap space. And then you got a bunch of draft picks because you're going to have a high draft pick probably next year. Trade back, get more picks, and you can put a bunch of young guys on this team that are going to be hungry and dogs and wanting to win. And then you go into 2025 with that, mentality, and you got Bo Nix ready to start in 2025 or Michael Penix. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think this Zach Wilson trade prevents the Broncos from taking a QB. Maybe it's not a Bo Nix or Michael Penix. Maybe it's a Spencer Rattler. Maybe it's, who's the other one? I forgot his name. But maybe it's him. Maybe those are the guys they're looking at for like maybe in the second or third round. And especially if they trade back to like pick 22, they pick up another third round pick and second round pick. They got the picks. They can get one of those guys. So personally, that's what I think is going to happen. But like I said, there's a lot of speculation going around. Pretty much everybody that I've heard, though, everybody I've talked to, or all the podcasts I've seen over the last couple hours, pretty much say the same thing. That the Broncos, this does not change the Broncos' mind on taking a quarterback in this year's draft. Maybe not at pick 12. People are different, varying on that. Some people, not very many, are like, Broncos are going to stay at pick 12 and they're going to take the best player available. A lot of people that were saying the Broncos now are going to trade back, accumulate more picks, and then, pick up one of these other guys. If Nix is still there, they'll take him. If Penix is still there, they'll take him. Maybe Spencer Rattler in round 2 or 3. Maybe, the other guy, Pratt, could be there and they take him. So I'm kind of on board with that now. I'm on board with the, trading back now. That, I mean, Zach Wilson, yeah, I understand, doesn't really move the needle that much as a, high quality starter. But it's like, now you can actually see what the Broncos' plans are, that you can actually tell what they're trying to do. They're bringing in Zach Wilson. Like I said, he's not going to be the future of the Broncos. We all know that. But the bottom line here is that now that they got two quarterbacks, well, three if you consider Ben DiNucci, which he's more of a practice squad guy. He's not really, that he's not a starter in my opinion. But now you got Stidham and Zach. You could still draft a QB and let him sit and learn for a year. That's what I think they're going to do. Or maybe they just completely tank on this season. Maybe they're just like, we're going to have a quarterback competition. Whoever wins is the starter, and whoever loses will be the backup. It's going to be a tank season. And then you go into next year's draft with a high draft pick, probably a top 5 draft pick, and you get one of the top guys next year. But here's the problem with that. I've seen a lot of people talk about that. But here's the problem with that. Even with Zach Wilson or Jared Stidham, I don't think the Broncos are going to lose enough games to be a top 5 pick. I do think they'll lose enough games to be a top 10 pick, which might help them in a long, being a top 10 pick. Say you draft a pick 7 or pick 8, and you want to trade up to say like 3 or 2 or 3 next year. That'll give you a little bit more leeway. You might have to trade more future assets. You might have to trade your second round pick next year to move up to that spot. But, you're not trading a bunch of first rounders. You don't have to trade Patrick Surtain. But I don't think that's the case. I do believe the Broncos still take a quarterback this year. Now, who that quarterback is has changed. Where they pick him has changed. Before today, I was like, they need to, if they can move up and get one of the guys, the top guys, they need to do it. That's who Sean Payton thinks is the guy. And they're willing to do that. They need to do it. If not, I was like, I'm comfortable. And honestly, what I wanted was them to stay at pick 12 and take Nix. Yes, I know that's a reach. But if Payton thinks he's the guy, you take him. But this signifies to me that maybe Bo Nix could be possibly Sean Payton's guy. Maybe he was like third on his, board. But it's like, that tells me that Sean Payton's like, no, he's not worth the 12th pick. Let's go out and get a quarterback, trade back from pick 12, pick up some future pick or some more picks. And hopefully Penix or Bo Nix are still there wherever they go, whether if it's pick 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whichever where they go. But this to me signifies they're going to trade back. I still think they get the quarterback of the future in this year's draft. He sits for a year, especially if it's a Spencer Rattler or Michael Pratt. They're definitely going to sit for a year. Penix and Nix could possibly be a starter this year, like start week 1, just depending on how they do in training camp in the preseason. But if it's Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler, they're going to at least be sitting a season. And honestly, if they're going to trade back with the Zach Wilson trade now, if they trade back and get more picks and still pick up, Bo Nix, let him sit for a year. Let him sit. Let him get, the learning under, get the system under his belt. That way, in next year's draft, you can maybe have a top 5 pick, maybe top 10, trade back into the draft, pick up more picks next year, and use the picks that you accumulate this year from, trading back from pick 12 and the picks you get next year from trading back from whatever pick you're at next year. Stockpile as many picks as you can and build the roster up for Bo Nix to start in 2025. That's what I think they're going to do. I think Zach Wilson, Jared Stidham battle for the starting job this year in training camp and in the preseason. They still trade back, get more picks, still draft the Penix, Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler or Bo Nix. Let them sit for a year. And then, whoever wins the, battle between Stidham and Wilson becomes the starter, and whoever loses gets cut. And then you got more picks. You can build a roster, and then you get a top pick next year. You can trade back, stockpile more picks, and still build your roster. But this is definitely a full-blown rebuild. Like, I do agree with most of these guys that you're not going to go into the season with just Zach Wilson and Jared Stidham on the roster. I think one of those two guys are going to be cut because I do believe, just like everybody else, or a lot of people on podcasts and the networks and everything say, the Broncos will still draft a quarterback this year. They're going to draft their quarterback. Hopefully he's the future. Let him sit. That's my thing. They're going to let him sit. And then it's going to be a quarterback competition between Stidham and Wilson. Whoever wins starts, and whoever loses gets cut. And honestly, if I had to pick between the two, if there's a quarterback competition between Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, I think Zach Wilson wins it. Honestly, he was I understand he hasn't played really all that great over the years, but to me, it's like if you're at pick 12 and you know Bo Nix is going to be there and you think Bo Nix is the guy, you know, why wouldn't you take him? And two, why would you trade for Zach Wilson? If Peyton really thinks Stidham is that guy, even as a quality backup, honestly, not saying that Zach Wilson is a world beater, but that says a lot about Stidham in my eyes. Sean Payton was ranting and raving about him last year whenever they signed him. And now all of a sudden they trade for Zach Wilson. Like, I don't get it. Like, you still got Ben DiNucci on the roster. Like, this to me says more about Stidham than anything else. Like, I don't think Sean Payton saw enough out of Stidham in those two games this past year against the Chargers and Raiders at the end of the season. He's seen enough. He's like, Stidham, no, I was wrong. I think that Sean Payton, no, he was wrong about Stidham, and he's not, a quality starter. Maybe a backup. That's why he's probably going to give him a chance to be the starter this year. That way, I don't see it any other way. Why would you trade for Zach Wilson? It doesn't make any sense to me. If you trust Jarrett Stidham, the only other option is that Peyton doesn't think any of these quarterbacks in the draft are the guy. None of them. Or, he doesn't think Nix or Penix or any of these other guys are the guy. And he truly is going to wait until next season or next draft to get the quarterback of the future. But you're still taking a big gamble there. Like, Sean Payton, knowing himself very well, he knows the Broncos probably going to be picking top 5 next year. Because Sean Payton, from Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, the disaster in 2022, Sean Payton had proved he's worth at least 4 wins. At least. We went 3 wins. 3 wins. If you don't count Russell Wilson for one game, because Russell Wilson won 4 games last year. In 2022. The Broncos won 5 in total. Sean Payton came in and won 8 games his first year. So Sean Payton is at the minimum at least good for 3 wins, if not 4. And you'll probably get a couple of wins here or there. So you're talking about maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 wins. I think the Broncos maybe, like if Sean Payton's good for 3 or 4 wins, I think the Broncos, team in itself, depending on the schedule and, timing and everything, could be up for 3 or 4 wins themselves. So that's still, another 6 to 8 games you win this year. And you're picking about pick 12 again next year. So I don't know. That's what I think, though. I think the Broncos still draft a quarterback this year. They trade back, get more picks. If Bo Nix is still there, wherever they, trade back to, they take him. The kid sits for a year. And then there's a quarterback competition between Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham. Whoever wins, starter. Whoever loses, cut. And then we go into the season with our rookie as our backup and one of those other 2 guys being the starter. And you got more picks. You built the roster through the draft somewhat this year. And then next year, you have a top 10 pick possibly, or even another, the 12th overall pick, 13th overall pick next year. And you can trade back and get more picks next year. So that's what I think is going to happen. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments below what you guys think this Zach Wilson trade means for the Broncos. Like I said, a lot of people, including myself, don't think this takes the Broncos off the board to get a quarterback this year. I still think they draft a Q. I really do. I don't think this stops them from taking one. Because Zach Wilson does not move the needle for anybody, I don't think. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe on this video, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.